to, there are no policy items, administrative item 8A, North Hollis Utility Undergrounding Assessment District. Maurice and Helen.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. This evening we are going to be presenting two recommended resolutions related to the initiation of the North Hollis Underground Assessment District. The first is to direct staff to prepare documents for the assessment district and authorize the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Harris & Associates not to exceed $47,000 to provide services related to the formation of the utility undergrounding assessment districts, essentially the engineer for the project, appropriating that money from the city's general capital improvement fund, and also to enter into two contracts, one with bond counsel services with Quint and Thimmig, and financial advisory services with Fieldman, Rolapp, and Associates. The second resolution is to direct the city manager to execute and deliver a petition for special assessment proceedings for an underground utility district in the North Hollis area. The undergrounding of overhead utilities on Hollis Street from Powell Street to the Berkeley border is included in the city's capital improvement program. And the capital improvement program considers utilizing an assessment district to fund this project. We've been working on this since September 2008 when the agency retained Harris & Associates to prepare a feasibility study to evaluate different funding options for the utility undergrounding through either an assessment district or a community facilities district. That has gone to the Public Works Committee several times to review alternatives, and the Public Works Committee has recommended that staff move forward with one of these options. Property owners have submitted a petition to form an assessment district, so that's what we're discussing tonight. Overall, the benefits of, there's three main benefits to undergrounding utilities. First is aesthetics. It removes all of the ugly wires from the visual view in the area. The second is safety, in that those wires are underground. There's no danger of them being downed by an earthquake or a storm. And reliability, because they're underground, they're safer and they can deliver the service on a more reliable basis. This is the proposed district configuration extending from Powell Street to the south to Ocean Avenue to the north. There's 21 property owners in this area, 36 acres, and the city owns 3 parcels in the Doyle Hollis Park and at the fire station. So an assessment district can be initiated in two ways, either through a property owner initiated petition or through a city council action. The property owner initiated petition must be initiated by a petition signed by at least 5 owners of assessable land within the proposed assessment district, owning lands constituting more than 1/2 of the area of all the assessable land within the proposed district. We've received petitions from 7 ownership entities representing 48.7% of the district. So the city's petition is needed to exceed the 50% requirement. Once the petition is submitted and certified by the engineer, the City Council can then accept the petitions to initiate the district, and if you direct the city manager to sign the petitions tonight, we would bring back that resolution to you at your next meeting to actually initiate the district. At this point, I'm going to ask Dennis Klingelhofer from Harris & Associates to come forward and review the assessment methodology with you, as well as the process to form a district. And after that, Maurice Kaufman will talk about the design, bonding, and construction process, the project budget, and the schedule.
Good evening, Mayor Davis, members of City Council. Again, I'm Dennis Klingelhofer with Harris & Associates. We did the feasibility study looking at the formation of the utility undergrounding district. As Helen indicated, when we look at utility undergrounding districts, there's really 3 types of improvements typically that are examined in building or identifying the special benefit that parcels received. That's the safety, the reliability, and the improvement in the overall aesthetics of the neighborhood. As part of the feasibility study, in addition to those three factors, also looked at parcel size to come up at least with an initial idea of what the assessments on individual parcels might be to determine whether it was feasible to proceed or there was enough property owner support to move forward. If you're familiar with benefit assessment districts, they're governed by state code, and the concept is that those parcels receive a special benefit that are unique or over and above benefits received by parcels at large elsewhere in the city, and their assessment is based upon that special benefit that parcels receive. So a parcel that receives a larger special benefit, i.e. has a larger assessment levied upon them. And under state code, that assessment must be proportional to the special benefit. We can't charge a parcel more than the special benefit that they receive. As I said, we've done the feasibility study. The next step, or one of the next steps, is to do the detailed engineer's report, where we really refine and detail the assessment methodology and calculation of assessments on each of the individual parcels. If I push the right button here. So the assessment on an individual parcel is based upon the estimated project cost. As of yet, detailed engineering plans have not been developed. The project's not gone out to bid, so we want to make sure that we try and be conservative in calculating the assessments on parcels. And Maurice will talk a little bit more about how we've developed the cost estimates. But the real crux is that as we do the engineer's report and tell property owners what their assessments will be, we can't increase that assessment on a parcel without going back to a vote of the property owners. And that's something that we want to try and avoid. If the assessment district is approved by property owners, engineering plans are completed, the project is bid, the actual assessment levied on each parcel will be based on actual construction costs. So if those costs are lower than our estimate that was used to form the assessment district, assessments on individual parcels will be reduced accordingly. Just some of the details that we'll be coming back to you if the project moves forward. Property owners will have the option to pay their assessments during a 30-day cash collection period rather than paying it over a 20 or 25-year life of the bonds to save the interest or the financing cost. And if a property has an assessment levied upon it, over the term of the district, that assessment is collected on the property tax roll on an annual basis. Just briefly, the process to form the assessment district. Helen has talked about the property owner petition under state code. That's one of the ways the process can be started. If we have petitions from more than 50% owners of land encompassing more than 50% of the district with a minimum of 5 property owners, can start the process. The next action that would occur with City Council would be a resolution of intent, really directing that an engineer's report be prepared. Once we've done that, the engineer's report comes back to the City Council with a resolution of intention, preliminary approving the engineer's report, setting a date for a public hearing, directing that notices be mailed to each property owner in the district, advising them of the public hearing and giving them an opportunity to, through a property owner ballot, either say they support or are in opposition to the formation of the assessment district. At the public hearing, property owners have the opportunity to address City Council. At the close of the public hearing, ballots are tabulated. Say if a majority of property owners are not in opposition to the district, council that can then form the assessment district. And at that point, we'd move forward with the final engineering design and bidding of the project.
So, as Dennis pointed out, once the assessment district has been formed and funding is certain, we would move forward with our typical CIP project of an undergrounding project. We would have to form an underground district with the residents, an intention to form the underground district, which would then trigger PG&E to move forward with their design work. And the city would need to hire a consultant, a joint trench consultant, to do all the joint trench composite drawings, which include PG&E drawings, the AT&T telephone, fiber optics, cable TV, and all. We would composite that together in a design drawing. All the design efforts probably is estimated to run about $725,000 for this size of a project. Once the design's finished, we would bid out the project, and we would get what the true cost of the undergrounding will be, have a more comfortable feel for that cost estimate, and then be able to sell the bonds for the project. Everything that the city would pay for in advance of selling the bonds would be reimbursable by the assessment district. I've developed a cost estimate for the project, and as you can see here, the total estimated amount to the assessment district is about $8.3 million. As you know, we've done a lot of undergrounding here in town. What I did is went back to our most recent project, the Park Avenue District project, and looked at the costs that we paid per linear foot on that project. And those costs included the design effort and construction management. And it was in the order of $925 a linear foot that we paid. So what I did is I projected that cost over the size of the project we have for North Hollis, and it comes up to about a $7.3 million project. But given that a portion of that has general benefits to it, about $700,000 worth of the undergrounding along the Hollis Street corridor is considered general benefits, which can't be charged to the individual property owners as a special benefit, and the city would need to pick up those costs. So we're looking at an estimated cost for construction for the assessment district of about $6.6 million. And since this was an estimate, I added a 20% contingency to it to come up with $7.9 million. And if you add the incidental costs for bonding and such, we're up to about the $8.3 million price tag.
But that 925 per linear foot, that incorporates all that?
Yeah, the 925 is the price we paid for roughly for the Park Avenue District undergrounding. And so it's good to have a cushion in there, because once we've sold, once we've gone forward with this assessment district, we can't go back if costs go up. And of course, our costs we paid for on Park Avenue had different prices for copper. Price of copper has gone up, so there's inflation. So you have to have some kind of a contingency in it.
So what I heard was that the actual assessments can go down, but the actual assessments cannot go up.
Correct. So once we bid the project out, we'll have a good idea of what the construction amount will be. We'll leave some contingency in there, and then we'll be able to sell the bonds based on the true engineering design cost and the construction dollar amount. We wouldn't want to sell more bonds than we need, because then the property owners need to pay off more. So there's some financial considerations we need to consider. To move it forward, we need to start off with $47,000 for consultant work to prepare the formation of the district, the engineer's report, and get us through the process. There's also, we need to get under contract with bond counsel and financial advisors for selling the bonds. The fees for them would not be paid unless the district is formed and we sell the bonds. And then, of course, there's the city's portion of this project that we need to consider. We've estimated it at about $1.6 million, or about 19% of the total cost. So The city share of the property assessments is estimated at $454,000. Those are the city parcels. We've got the fire station. We've got the Hollis Park area. And I'm going from memory here, but it accounts to about $450,000. The general benefits, $700,000. That's the Hollis Street corridors, general benefits that you can't charge to the private property owners. And then there's a post office site, which is federal, that we're going to need to pick up the tab for. We would probably send them a bill, but you can't guarantee that they're going to pay for it. And then there are costs to upgrade the city's parcels to receive the underground service. That's estimated around $40,000 for the fire station. So as far as the schedule is concerned, we're estimating that it could take up to about 8 months to form the district. And once that's formed, then we would move forward with the design effort with PG&E and our consultants to put the bid package together. That's probably about a 14-month process by the time you work with all the utilities. And then we would bid the project, sell bonds, that's about another 5 months, and then we're into construction mode. It's a big area. It's probably about 2 to 3 years before you see the wires come down. As you know, we're still working on Park Avenue. We're still waiting for the rest of the wires to come down. So it's a slow process. The slowest part on that is trying to coordinate with all the private property owners to do all their share so that all the utility companies can do their work. But so we're looking 3 years out before the wires would come out. So with that, we've got the recommended resolutions here for your consideration. And if you have any questions, we're free.
Any questions for Maurice?
Well, I don't know if I have questions. I have some comments. So.
Yeah,
Ruth, go ahead.
How would the numbers change if we extended the boundaries of the assessment district to cover 65th and 66th Streets?
So in other words, doing Hollis up to the city limits and also the
No,
side streets?
I'm not talking about 67th.
It changes the boundaries. I mean, $900 and $925 a linear foot, but the key issue is whether or not you could get the support of the additional property owners. And at this point, we've received a petition for the boundary that we have. And at this point, we're at a little over 50%, which is what we need to form an assessment district. And if we were to add those 2 other streets, you've got a lot of residents there. That would be key players in whether or not this would even be able to be formed.
Yeah, really the problem is if you did extend it, like on my street, 62nd Street, there's going to be cost to the homeowners because now they have to have a new electrical service come to their house. So you're probably looking another $5,000 to $10,000, $15,000 for the electrical service.
And you're not going to get the votes to make the district go forward.
So
this is a unique situation. These blocks of Hollis Street.
Right. So the boundaries that we've come up with go from Powell up to Ocean Avenue, and then Hollis is already undergrounded from north of Ocean Avenue. So we're going to get a big area without any utilities. On the east side, it ends at Doyle Street, which we undergrounded, and it would be undergrounded all the way to the railroad. And then, of course, west of the railroad is undergrounded. So it creates a huge area north of Powell Street that's undergrounded.
Any other questions, Jennifer?
I have a question, which is why, without the city's participation, we're at 47%, as I recall.
Correct.
Why have the other owners declined, or why are we not? I mean, why would it seems like a delicate balance to have the city weigh in to put us over the 50%. Why aren't we getting that kind of support from the actual property owners?
I don't know whether or not the property owners that signed the petition talked to all the other property owners. Once we go out further with the formation of the district, we will hear back from them as to whether or not they approve of the district.
And also the initial petitions to start the process, the actual formation of the district is based on an election. So all the property owners in the district will have the opportunity to vote on whether they want the district or not. So what we're trying to do is just get the process moving. And so
it just seems like it would be really practical to make sure that there's buy-in before. I mean, with these fixed costs that we're talking about tonight, wouldn't it behoove us to know ahead of time, at least make sure that the other property owners that would be directly impacted by this assessment are on board.
Yeah, so the
No,
fixed costs we're
if they
talking
have
about.
over 50%, they are on board.
Well, but that's the city portion that puts us over the 50%. My point is that the other property owners, not including the city, why wouldn't we get that 50%?
Right, so at this point, what we're talking about, the fixed cost is the $47,000 to move forward with the process, and then we will be notifying them of the big, the $8.3 million district, and at that point, we're going to hear back as to whether or not they support it or not. At this point, we don't know whether or not they're on board. No, I don't know what you might want to hear from property owners to see whether or not they've talked to some of the others. I know there's at least 6 or 7 different property owners that have submitted petitions.
I might just clarify one thing. There's really, I guess, 2 thresholds to start the process with the property owner petitions. Under state law, the requirement is 5 property owners and 50% of the acreage within the district. When it comes time to ask property owners to approve the formation of the district, the ballots are weighted by assessment amounts. So the more that a property owner has to pay, the greater the weight of their vote, since they receive the greater benefit. And I think with the petitions that the city's received thus far, some of the larger property owners, and so on that threshold, I believe you're substantially over the 50%, even without the city's ballots to start the process. So the approval process, the property owner ballots are weighted by the assessment amount.
Ken, did
So
you
you're
have some
saying that if there
comment?
was a vote, basically, at this time, the petitioners would have enough weight to carry the vote?
I believe so, yes.
So my concern then is that there are property owners who will be assessed if this were to go forward that otherwise haven't weighed in as supporting it. And I see the benefit to the town, for sure, and the general benefit, but I just feel like if we're going to do legwork around a vote and an assessment, that legwork could be done now and not later when we're otherwise sure of attaining the vote that we want.
See, and I want to share that exact concern. I think the process is unfair. Everybody should be invited to the table that's going to have to pay this assessment. And so what you've done here is you've invited a majority of the people, and the rest of them don't have any say in it. So you're going to go through this process, and you already know you've got a majority of the votes. So all these other people are going to be stuck with an assessment that they may not want, don't want anything to do with, may not even be able to afford it. And I don't think that's right. And one of the things I did want to do was adopt a notice policy so that you don't go forward without notifying everybody who's affected before you take any actions.
Every property owner was notified of this meeting.
Yeah,
And a copy of that notice is attached to the staff report.
yeah, they were notified, but suppose they don't, I know one of the property owners doesn't want to participate in it, but they're going to get stuck with it. So it's kind of not fair to have everybody, you notify them, but you should have a meeting and invite them, not just notify them. So that's my opinion.
Mayor Davis? Mayor?
Michael, yes.
Just one other thing to keep in mind is even once, if you go that far and there's a vote and you receive a majority of the value, it's still up to the council whether it wants to form the district. You can only act if you have a majority of the property owners in terms of its valuation approving it. It still takes that action of the council to then go ahead and actually form it. Okay?
I don't know, I just think it's better to invite all the people that are affected to the meeting, and then they can express their opinions. You don't have to wait till they're, notified. Just invite them to the meeting. But go ahead.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we extended the boundaries to 65th and 66th, that adds a whole lot of small property owners. So their assessments would be the smallest by this formulation that I heard, because they have the smallest share of the properties, correct? Yeah. Okay. So given that, it seems to me we should try for the larger assessment district where there have been known issues around undergrounding on some of these streets that affect the residents, and that, as Councilmember Bukowski is saying, we need an education campaign to get those property owners on board.
So we actually looked into, we had discussions with some of those property owners at our Public Works Committee meeting with regard to the idea of an assessment district for undergrounding. And so there's different processes for assessment districts, or there's different processes for financing. There could be a community facilities district, which gives you more flexibility in the amount that you would charge each individual property owner, versus the assessment district, which is based on special benefit. And so we looked at it, and at that time, some of the residents would have supported a small amount, but not what it would have taken if we were to follow the assessment district process. That amount was going to be more than they would be willing to do. So what we were considering in our in one of the drafts of the feasibility study was to do a separate community facilities district in the area of those residents near 65th Street. But it would require those property owners to gather support through a petition similar to what we're doing right now with the assessment district. And we never heard back from them because they were not interested in pursuing it at that time. So if we were to try to add that area to this project, which is the assessment district, it would be a big signature gathering campaign by somebody, but it can't be from the city. It would have to be from a developer or a property owner that really wants it.
We were proposing actually two separate districts. One assessment district for what we've presented tonight. The second would look at the community facilities district for the area to the north.
But that requires a 2/3 vote, not a 50% vote.
Right. And what we were thinking about is when we do our capital improvement program, in, probably next year once we know what our funding is, then we can consider, well, could the redevelopment agency contribute to a community facility district to help subsidize some of the cost of undergrounding in that area near those residences.
Yeah.
I think we have someone from the public who'd like to speak. You want to come forward?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is John Schmidt. I happen to be the property owner at 6262 Hollis Street, which is the corner of 63rd. On the assessment that was sent to me this past week, I'm assessment number 19. I'm also the president of Automated Service and Products, primary tenant of the same property. We are Northern California distributors for automatic doors, Horton Automatic Doors, and also represent other architectural companies for the exterior envelope of buildings, and presently we're supplying the revolving doors for the three, what the call now towers, used to be Watergate Towers. I'd like to start with this piece of information they sent about this special district. They gave us a nice photograph here. I'll call it a interesting photograph. There's no parked automobiles. There's no canteen trucks. And there's no skateboarders. I don't see it as being really Hollis and 62nd Avenue as I know it. I drive by it every day, twice a day. On the enhanced photograph, they show us a view with no light posts. What are holding up these new lights? My imagination or skyhooks? Or are we going to have the light posts like they have on South Hollis with all the flooding banners? And the third thing that caught my attention was what they're asking me to pay, $46,170 up front to remove one utility post and then provide some sort of light post. Or they'll allow me to pay down a 6-year loan, which comes at $99,325 at 6%, or an 8% loan, which comes at $118,950. Other thing I find it rather amazing, we saw in the background this evening, that the original idea was to go all the way to the Berkeley boundary. This map they produce goes to Ocean for a nice arbitrary area, which stops 3 blocks short of the Berkeley area. And just by coincidence, the 6 largest owners are the largest developer here in Emeryville, which commands 48% of the assessment. And with the city of Emeryville and the park, you're over 50%. So if this goes ahead, there's no need to call a vote. You have it. I have no say at all. And I find that rather irritating as being a property owner in Emeryville for 24 years. So I'm rather concerned, and I don't want to, this gentleman's a fine engineer, I'm sure, but I really wonder if we need to go along with this whole process, being there are so many other things that have to be done, rather than paying out $47,000 up front dollars to start a bond process that's $3.38 million for underground utilities, which I don't think we really need right now in a slow economy. And I believe there are other pressing problems in this northern area other than overhead utilities and street poles. We hear almost every day or every week on the news where another utility has been dug into, exposed, and created a hazard. I cannot agree that all utilities should be underground. Thank you.
Any other comments? Jeff?
Good evening. I'm Jeff Sears with Wareham Development. We're supporters of this. We're going to be a large impacted group of properties. I mean, what I think we've been looking jealously south of Powell at Hollis for a lot of time. It's beautiful down there. It's undergrounded and so forth. Also in the last handful of years, we've seen city infrastructure really be challenged. There's been a lot of water main breaks in our neighborhood. We've had challenges with PG&E outages and so forth. We've worked with your Public Works Department and others trying to address these issues where we have even far less control. So we're concerned about that reinvestment. We've just seen, hopefully, the conclusion of a lot of sewer and storm work in this neighborhood, addressing a real serious concern. So we're trying to push, like you hear in the discussions nationwide, for investment in infrastructure because it's a foundation on which you build. So what we really see here is, you know, the opportunity for the city to leverage their money in a world of limited resources. I mean, you have to spend some money. Maurice detailed that, but for your $1.6 million, you get $8.3 million of investment. Now, our properties, be honest, they all are powered by PG&E. They're all working fine. We're just trying to see the bigger picture, the kind of bigger picture that was seen when the Emeryville round was funded. You know, that was people who raised their hand to try to volunteer to create something that in other cities is paid for as a general service, you know, bus service. And that was something that worked well, and then it went out to the public in a vote much like we're talking about here, you know, people seeing there's a benefit and paying for it. So I think the important thing here is there are a lot of property owners who have asked you to consider this. You've heard from the city attorney. I guess 100% vote, you could still decide not to do it. So you can take people's feedback. I mean, the process, I think, that is being requested is just to start the dialogue, start meetings where, you know, Councilman Bukowski could have people participate. I mean, I think this was distributed, and so one gentleman's come tonight, but there will be more of that. So I don't see how that's divesting anyone of the opportunity to participate or taking any decision-making away from you once you've heard the public. So we think this is the kind of thing that cities, Emeryville and others included, really need to think about in a world of limited resources. I would love to come in and ask you, will you pay for 100% of it right now with, you know, your capital improvement funds? I just don't think that's realistic. And I want to see maximize benefits in Emeryville, and so we're willing to invest in this.
Any other comments from council?
Yeah, I almost wish we, 21 property owners? I mean, I would like to just talk to each one of them and just find out what they think and then come back and then you could make a decision. But right now, you have a few people that get the tail wagging the dog here. So.
Can I ask what proportion of that 47% are Wareham controlled properties?
I don't know. It's a large share.
Okay. maybe I got it wrong.
And their 5 limited partnerships.
Was there a 6th property owner that was not Wareham that was part of that group?
HFH, which I believe is Andy Getz.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to make a comment before we bring this to some kind of resolution. This morning I was up on 67th Street meeting with a small business, medium-sized business owner who was very concerned about the PG&E poles on 67th Street outside of his business. He had an incident several weeks ago where the big transformer on the pole, something happened to it. The line snapped, just barely missed his workers that were coming to work. The line snapped. They kind of snaked all over the street, really frightening the people there and bringing to his attention that we have a real problem with PG&E lines in this city. All you have to do is look at the poles around town. And so it brought it very clearly to my mind that we have got to invest in this city in undergrounding. I think it's a given in the Emeryville General Plan that we want to see the city at some point in time with all of these utilities undergrounded, not only for aesthetic reasons, but for health reasons and safety reasons, and also for really the protection of the utility infrastructure. What we're being asked to do here tonight is, as Mr. Biddle pointed out, is not the final. It's to start the process. And I cannot say too strongly that this is not the time to stop investing in this city and in the infrastructure of this city. This is the time to prepare for what is coming down the pike at us. I look at this, and no matter, we still have lots of time for discussion, to have meetings of the property owners, to hear everything they have to say, but we will be starting the process. This is a process that will add to the benefit of the city of Emeryville. We pay 20% of it. Private property people invest or pay 80% of it. Now that's a pretty darn good deal. We know that we do not have, or possibly will not have, because of Jerry Brown and the state legislature destroying or trying to destroy the redevelopment agency, we do not have the flexibility or the capital that we have had in the past to build this city as we have. I would urge the council to move ahead with these 2 resolutions tonight to start the reinvestment in this city, in the infrastructure. There will be plenty of opportunity if people are not happy with the process, if they're not happy with the assessment. This is an investment in this city. So I would urge the council to approve these resolutions, and I would call for a motion.
I have one more comment, please.
Mr. Bukowski.
A lot of these are commercial properties, and you have tenants. And a lot of those tenants are going to be the ones that have to pay this price because you have a triple net lease. Well, most of these leases, the cost of the taxes and the assessment go right to the tenants. So, how many tenants are going to be impacted? These are very tough economic times, and I think you need to decide, look at who's going to be impacted here. Well, this guy maybe can't afford that.
Councilmember Bukowski, you should talk to the businessman I talked to today, because he considers the safety of his employees and the proper delivery of utility services to his business. He knows it's not free. It costs money.
You could put somebody out of business, though, so,
Yeah.
If I may respond to your comment, that would be great if we knew others were going to pay these bills for 20, 25, 30 years. The truth is, many leases don't have those provisions, but even if they do, leases don't go for that long. And every time a lease rolls over, the tenant gets to decide, how much am I going to pay for this space? And they add up the rent and the expenses. So if the expenses are higher, I get, and a landlord, other landlords get less rent. So we're really taking the majority of the risk. It would be great, again, if we could imagine someone else was paying for it all. That isn't how it'll work.
Yeah. Well, you know what, I'm going to move both items A, 1 and 2, and I have a light pole in front of my house. I wish I didn't have it there, but there's stuff hanging off of it, and it looks kind of like some of those photos you see from India. It's now time to move out of this American mindset of throw it up, let's keep it cheap, and let's do something right. And I think in the long run, this is the right thing to do. It's going to make the city look that much better. And I firmly believe it's a safety issue, because when I look around my neighborhood, no one has a current code connection to their house. And I wish we could bring it up into more of the residential areas, but so I would move this item, both items,
Both resolutions?
1 and 2.
Do I hear a second?
No, I have a substitute motion, which would be to hold over this item so that we can hear from staff what alternatives could include the business owner that you talked about on 67th Street, who would not be included in this, or other residential areas, and to just have a better picture of it so that we know what the alternatives are. My fear is that we move forward, and I heartily agree that investing in our infrastructure is important, and we would like to underground the whole city. How best can we do that? What's the most prudent way to do it, and what's the greatest benefit that we can bring to all, including the residents of town?
I'll second your motion.
I support holding that over, too.
Call the roll on the substitute motion.
Can I ask one other question, which is, what is the timeline that, I know that one of these, maybe it was the Mello-Roos, not the special assessment, that had a timeline of sorts.
If we're going to move forward with your proposal, we need to get a consultant under contract to do that kind of work. So we would need to have some kind of a contract amendment with Harris Associates, who just made the presentation here, to do more studies, if that's what you want.
Well, then I could add to my substitute motion that I don't know what that contract amount would have to be. If it would be the full $47,000, I can't imagine that it would, because that was to create the district, that staff look into putting together that contract as well.
Well, it'd probably be more, because there'd be a lot more people to talk to and coordinate with, because all the residents in the area.
But that's what we need, is the buy-in. So it does
Upke?
cost to talk to people, but I think that's what we need.
You have some wisdom for us here.
Well, what I would do if you want to hold this over is to do so, and then we'll have to come back at that next meeting on December 6th with a scope of work for a contract for Harris and Associates to be able to look into the alternatives that you wish to examine. If I could, Mayor, just to take this opportunity to add to this, if you look at what we accomplished with undergrounding south of Powell, it's a tremendous benefit to this community. You have the opportunity to do that same thing, to create that same impact north of Powell for almost the entire stretch, with a group of willing property owners who are willing to do it right now. And you're not going to have that opportunity forever. And I don't think you're going to get a lot of support from other property owners if you expand the district. So we'll do whatever the council wants, but I think you may be letting something slip away here.
Yeah.
Call the roll on the
Can I
substitute motion.
pose a question to Wareham? Can we have a month to think about this? I mean, what if you're interested in that?
They're still going to want to upgrade the infrastructure in a month.
In a month, I can't imagine that it would change that much.
So just a comment, if we were to start on the undergrounding district now, and there was desire for these other property owners to be a part of the district, to expand the boundaries, we could do that as a part of the formation process that we're trying to start right now.
But wouldn't that shift the 50%? Because it would be a different district.
Well, that's a question. Would that matter? Do you know?
Of course it would.
Of course it would.
Yeah.
Comments as well. if we were to start the process with the district as identified currently, there's a couple things that could happen. One, as we start talking with PG&E, maybe as they do their design, there are poles outside the boundaries that have to be removed to have a system that functions. And so, this is a preliminary boundary. It could change. And if there are parcels outside of the boundary that want to participate, they could come to the city and petition to be included in the district and amend the boundary. I believe we still have to have, the 50 plus, including those other property owners, to expand the boundary.
Good evening. My name's Paul Thimmig with Quint and Thimmig, the prospective bond counsel. You're really not setting the boundaries tonight. You're just setting the wheels in motion. For the one council member, they wrote into state law a mandatory public hearing. Everyone gets a ballot. Everyone will have the opportunity to appear at that public hearing and vote. This is the very beginning of the process. This isn't anywhere near the end. And to even get accurate assessment numbers, we need to have an engineer's report. So far, there's just been some estimates based on your public works director, but to have the more intensive work and actually get the numbers to present to the property owners in a more formal way, you need to get the process going. But we could add people later if we have that petition and it's 50% or more of the area. One thing that we're missing here is this only does the main lines underground in the roadway. It does not do the connections to the properties. So you get more resistance from homeowners because they have to pay that connection. It's effectively more expensive for them than a business. Right. So residential undergrounding districts are much more difficult to get to the goal line. And the vote really is by the burden. And the people who have the burden have the majority. It's a vote for each dollar of assessment, effectively. So that whole equation changes when you mix residential and commercial. It's not necessarily a good idea in the general scheme of things. So I respect that the council wants to pick up as much as it can, but the staff's been studying this for a long time, and the idea of bifurcating residential and commercial is frankly a good one because there are different dynamics of the property owners and the cost to them in the overall scheme of things. And as the city attorney said, you're putting the 20% of the money in. You don't put the money in, it doesn't happen. So you have control of the process. Each one of these resolutions has. This is not a vote to form the assessment district. The council is not deciding that at this point. You're just, again, getting the professionals in the room to be able to move the process along.
What about the engineer's report that we had from a year or two ago, and how that impacts or could otherwise
That was a study. That's just a study. There is no engineer's report yet. It's like the pieces of an engineer's report, but the more intensive study by the engineer isn't there yet. I mean, it might not look that much different from what the public works director's put together because he has a lot of experience with undergrounding, but until you get that formal engineer's report, you're really not ready to talk to property owners in a formal way. It probably won't change the big numbers, and you're still going to have people who don't want to do it, don't want to pay anything. It's a stressed economic times. That's why it's a majority vote. Maurice is 2/3 vote, but 2/3 by registered voter if there's more than 12 registered voters in the district. Completely different dynamic to put one of these together. Benefit is irrelevant in a Maurice district. So they're fundamentally different approaches, but state law was changed years ago to make it a much more rigorous process to get to the goal line because you are going to pull people along that aren't going to be happy. You're never going to get a 100% vote on something like this. There's going to be property owners that are not going to want to pay, but hey, it's a process that's a majority vote. But again, it's up to the council ultimately to decide where to go with this. That's why we have a mandatory public hearing. I have seen some of these, even where there's majority support. The council does not go forward with it because there's a huge opposition. It might not be 51%, but if 45, that may be enough to say, wait a minute, we don't really want to do this. But we can't get there unless you get the process rolling.
I don't know, what would happen if a couple of these people would lose their property as a result of this assessment, or somebody might go out of business? I just think it makes sense to find out what the impact is before you go forward. That's all I'm saying.
That's why we do a formal engineer's report. The ballot that goes to each property owner tells exactly what they have to pay. Nobody pays the whole amount up front typically. We bond, that's why we go to bond. We stretch the payments out over 20 years. When the gentleman says mine would be X, it's paid over time. So again, you're right. There are people that it might have a very adverse impact on. Do you suffer the whole $8 million project because one person's going to have a problem? That's for you to decide once we get to the formal public hearing. And I have had clients that do informal hearings, property owner meetings with the engineer and the public works director, and sometimes bond counsel's there. And in Oakland Hills has a number of underground assessment districts. They typically would hold one or two informal property owner meetings, mainly to just get support for the matter. But there is a required public hearing and ballot procedure specified by state law so that no one is uninformed what this means to their property. And it has the cost if you pay up front, if you pay over time. So all that is covered as we move forward. But right now, all we have is estimates, we have studies, we don't have the formal process to get to that point where people are giving an informed decision on exactly what the numbers are.
I don't know, you put together a majority first, and then you go to these folks, and they have no choice. Sure, they're going to be a ballot, but
you wouldn't even want to spend $47,000 if you didn't have a majority that you thought you were going to get to the goal line. I mean, when you say that, why would you put up the upfront money if you didn't have a good idea that you were going to make it all the way? From my perspective, you want as much upfront as you can, but you'll never pull everybody along. So. Yeah. I understand your concerns, and that's why there's a formal process under state law to form these.
So
that requires a public hearing.
I have another question.
Sure.
You made a comment where you thought it was better to bifurcate commercial from residential, and to my mind, then that makes the residential that much harder to get, because then you're going with a different kind of an assessment district that requires 2/3 vote, not 50%. So that makes it harder.
If you go the Melrose route, you can still use the assessment route to go the residential. And frankly, most of them are not Melrose districts. They're assessment districts for exactly that reason, that 2/3 vote is just a huge threshold to get. So most of the residential ones are assessment districts too, but they're different assessment districts, not typically combining the two. You want to hear
But it would lower the cost to expand the district.
It may lower the cost, but you're pulling along homeowners at that point, and you want to hear howls of, I can't afford this is going to drive me out of my house.
And you're pulling along homeowners who have lost 20 to 30 to 40% of their property in the last 4 years. Yeah. At this point in time, it does not make economic sense.
And business owners' property have been stressed too, but homeowners, it's just a different dynamic when you pull them in, and if you mix the two,
most of the properties are rental properties around where I live, so I'm going to say.
Do you want to restate?
There's a very vocal group of residents who are very interested in having the undergrounding happen for them, and would not like to be left out. They've been participating for years.
They want it to happen, Jennifer, but I've worked extensively with them. They want it to happen, but they want the city to pay for it because their properties have lost substantial value in the last 4 years. Many of them are underwater. So at this point in time, the city doesn't have the money. The redevelopment agency can't spend the money on it. We have an opportunity here to have private property people pay 80% to do this stretch of Hollis Street. It baffles me that we cannot see the value to the city on this, moving ahead on this project, especially as we know this is just the start. There will be many, many other meetings taking place, many other abilities to say yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down. I wish you would reconsider your motion. And I would second Kurt's motion.
I was also going to say, I mean, when you really think about the cost to a homeowner, you're probably looking at $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 when you figure that it might not be $925 a foot out front, but you have that cost. Plus then you have the cost to bring the electrical service to the house, which means...
Well, actually, these are condos, so
Condos.
it's not all just single-family dwellings. And
Yeah.
I don't know that actually in the assessment that we looked at last year that single-family dwellings were included. It was mostly multifamily.
Yeah, but if we're going to do it, I mean, in the residential area, it shouldn't matter whether it's single-family house or condominium.
I just feel like there's more information to be had on that.
Do you want to restate your motion?
My motion was to hold this over and get more information on the difference of the districts, whether it's strictly the commercial districts that we're looking at tonight, or if it were to include a portion of the residential
Nobody seconded Curtis. They just made the
neighbors.
motion.
And I don't intend to, you know,
Substitute and roots.
to hold it over for 6 months or a year. I'm just talking that there's more information, I think, to be had, and more people to be notified and discuss it.
I'll jump in.
Well, what specific information are you requesting of staff? What is the specific information
To know,
that you
we've
need?
had several different possibilities that have been presented, whether if we were to do a Mello-Roos or whether we were to do an assessment district, what the differences are in terms of those assessments if you're using the residential areas included. Going up to 67th Street. You know what, I feel like we had a report previously that gave us a lot of this information, and that hasn't been presented tonight. And I think there's other information that the council would benefit from hearing.
Are you asking us to come back at a date certain, like December 6th?
Well, I want it to be feasible for the staff.
We're going to need to retain Harris and Associates to provide these reports you're asking for, so we would have to come back with a PSA for that.
I think that would be prudent.
So,
Would bring it back when, Helen?
We could bring that back to the next meeting.
At December
Agreement with
6th?
Harris and Associates.
Oh, you're talking about a contract to,
Expand
and
the-
then when would the issue come back to the council?
I don't know if we can answer that tonight. That's something we could provide you at the next meeting, give you a timeline.
We have the feasibility study done, so we would have to hear from Harris if they could come back next time, 2 weeks, to make a presentation on that, if you want that. Is that something you could do?
Call the roll on this West motion.
Well, can I interject here? Councilmember Brinkman made the motion to approve the existing resolutions. There was no second.
I
at that-
seconded it.
You seconded subsequent to Councilmember West made the motion to continue. Councilmember Bukowski seconded that motion. So it really wasn't technically a substitute motion because Councilmember Brinkman's motion was not seconded. You seconded Councilmember Brinkman's motion, so that is the
Substitute
sort of
motion.
de facto substitute motion. So that is the one that's on the table initially. Now before you is the motion to essentially approve the resolutions that are before you. Does that make sense to everybody?
My substitute is not a substitute.
We
Yours
have the
was.
line of reasoning here.
Your substitute was not a substitute?
It turns out it wasn't because it hadn't
It
yet
turns
been
out it was the
seconded.
main motion.
It was the main
Main motion.
Okay.
Inadvertently.
So yours is a substitute motion,
Which
Okay.
you seconded.
and I seconded.
Yeah.
Call the roll on Councilmember Brinkman's motion.
Wait a minute. Okay, all right.
And this is to approve Resolution 8A1 and A2.
Correct.
Councilmember Atkin,
No.
Councilmember Brinkman,
aye.
Councilmember Bukowski,
No,
Vice Mayor West,
No.
and Mayor Davis.
Aye.
So now we have a substitute motion.
Correct.
Okay.
To hold over.
Call the roll.
Councilmember Atkin,
Aye.
Councilmember Brinkman,
I just will say yes.
Councilmember Bukowski,
aye.
Vice Mayor West,
Aye.
and Mayor Davis.
No. All right,
Okay.
moving along.